Okay, this is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel presented by the Khoodeelaar campaign organizer Muhammad Haque, and also brought to you, whoever is watching this, whenever they're watching it, as part of the movement defending the community in and from the East End of London. Now, that movement was set up, founded 2 years before the creation of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets in East London, that came into force, so-called in April 1965. So it is 2 years before the Tower Hamlets Council existed. And the main focus of the movement defending the community in the East End of London initially, primarily, was the then borough of Stepney in East London. Now, Tower Hamlets Council, for those who are not familiar with these historic but very important facts, Tower Hamlets Council that is now in existence is made up of the former three boroughs of Stepney, Poplar, and Bethnal Green. And the first kind of few decades of the council's main headquarters, or the main headquarters for most of the life before it moved to Blackwall on the area called East India. Now, remember East India Company? So East India is near in Poplar, just on the kind of eastern side of the Blackwall Tunnel that goes through under the River Thames. So the East India is where the council moved, directly resulting from our campaign at that time against its racist policies over housing. And in 1987, I was among the people who effectively occupied the council chamber in Patriot Square. Note the word Patriot. Patriot Square off the Cambridge Heath Road, which is in the Bethnal Green area, London E2. And we occupied as part of the direct action to stop the then political control that was being assumed by what is now the Lib Dem. I call the Lib Dem, not Lib Dem, because they're dumb. And they were called then SDP, Social Democratic Party, SDP, Liberal Alliance. That was a corrupt, racist, and stupid alliance. The fact that such a racist, stupid alliance could actually get control of the elected council proved how bad the Tower Hamlets Labour Party was. So we shall come to all of those in due course. But this is a kind of updated disclaimer and commentary note for those who are watching this for the first time, or those who kind of don't understand where it is coming from, or etc., or have questions. And the general invitation to anyone watching this, and anyone seriously watching this, not trolls, not racists and other people that have no real serious interest in the substance of the contents of the broadcast. Anyone who has got genuine, factual, evidential kind of queries, they can establish a link with the Khoodeelaar Twitter account and make initial contacts seeking any information. And the question should be very brief. And we cannot engage in anything other than strictly substantial, original, genuine questions. Now, currently we have been, of course, spending more time in this particular program, that is to say, diagnosing Fleet Street, which is the collection of the newspapers published from London addresses, and that are normally, misleadingly and wrongly, inaccurately, collectively referred to as the, quote, national newspapers. The national newspapers include the Times, the Guardian, the Boris Graph, which still claims to be called the Boris Graph, still claims to be the Daily Telegraph and the Telegraph Group. And the most pernicious kind of collection of titles represented by the Daily Mail. And of course, the Dirty Diggers, Daily Scum, which is the Sun, and the legacy of the racist Canadian Beaverbrook, the Daily Express, corrupt to the core, racist to the core, stupid to the core. And later additions to the Express group, so-called Sunday Express, and the Daily Star, which was published in the 1980s. And at the very beginning of the publication of the Star, I set up a campaign against that Daily Star because it was a racist publication. And my campaign was already in existence, but I added as the target of the campaign the Daily Star because it had published a series of racist idiocies and incitements against a Bangladeshi family based in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. So this campaign, this broadcast and this title of Diagnosing Fleet Street, World Exclusive, is literally that. It's not like we are imitating somebody else or we are following somebody else and we are kind of looking up to somebody else. There is not any channel anywhere currently known or accessible that is doing anything like what we are doing. So any genuine, serious student of media, the role of the Fleet Street papers and their tributaries, their kind of local versions, regional versions, should treat this as the original contribution and platform. Now, I update a note to the general description and purpose and the role of this program by referring to a person whose contribution I only noticed a few hours ago. And he published a video on the Facebook that I came across about between 4 and 5 or 5:30 in GMT today, Friday, 12th of March 2021. And that was, it says, it was kind of posted or uploaded or made on a speech he gave in 2015 about the racist media. And what this was pegged onto was the kind of publication of a statement by England Society or English Society of Editors. All of that actually refers to the interview broadcast by Oprah Winfrey with Meghan Markle. It is with Meghan Markle, not the Harry bit, the bit about Meghan Markle. And the attack that, or the series of attacks that have been made against Meghan Markle by all the racists in Britain as a result of in response to her claim that she was the victim of racism everywhere. I mean, the media and the Buckingham Palace and the royal family. And the Society of Newspaper Editors or Society of Editors is actually a right-wing racist society. It's not like an association of genuine journalists. It's an association of people in denial of the truth. And this is an association, as has been exposed in their statement in the last few days, literally, is an association, is a collection, is a club. It's a club of racists who are in positions of being editors in the so-called Fleet Street papers and the other papers from outside of London addresses. So they have been doing is they have actually rallied together. All the racists have united or have been united, if you like. Or, I mean, they have responded or volunteered to support the kind of need for Brenda, also known as Queen Elizabeth II. And the Brenda name is popularized and has been popularized by the Private Eye fortnightly so-called satirical publication, but I use it and I've been using it for a very long time. And Charlie, her elder son, Charles, is called Brian in that same vocabulary, if you like. And calling them Brenda and Charlie actually makes them human or come across as human rather than the monstrosities of the monarchy and the various kind of artificiality and inhumane titles. The monarch. I mean, Brenda never, or Brenda hardly in public allowed to be quoted or reported as speaking like human beings. One had a horrible year, or annus horribilis, she said. It's not English. Annus horribilis is most certainly not English. And yet she was allowed to glorify her position by using the Latin phrase annus horribilis. That actually followed that murder of Diana, the mother of Harry, now being the subject of the attacks by the royal family and the kind of followers, the stooges in Fleet Street. What it exposes to students of empire, and in this context, the students of empire in the subcontinent, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and the contextually next door kind of locations, because of the duration of the time and the various administrative things that the empire did, Sri Lanka and Nepal and Burma, because the British imperialists seized the occupation of Burma in the 1930s, I think. So therefore, there are some differences in terms of sequences and connections and so-called legacies left behind by the imperialists. So the students of empire, and the students meaning in a critical independent way, not servile students. And this program never follows any particular party, any particular state, any particular kind of regime, or any particular kind of individual holder of any position at any level, at any state, in any state ever. What we do follow and we observe are the universal values, which anyone watching this must make a note of. And whatever I'm saying can be, of course, replayed, so you are not missing anything if you have not understood it the first time. And some of the sounds and the pronunciations may not be all familiar to people watching from other locations. And what this program aims to do is two-layered, establish the values of universality and practice the values of universality. And that includes everyone within the framework of ethics and morality. It doesn't include anyone who is a fascist, who is a kind of racist, who is an anti kind of other people's human rights, basic human rights. And when we talk about the subcontinent, which we are going to do increasingly more frequently than we have done on this channel so far, when we say Narendra Modi is a criminal, we don't say it lightly. Because Narendra Modi in India is a criminal that will go down in history as a disgrace to the freedom movement, the freedom struggle by all people. And one of the people I relate to many extents, not everything, is of course Subhash Bose. But Subhash Bose wasn't given the chance, if you like, to kind of elaborate on his plan, and he was not supported by most of the Brahmins. Of course, the Brahmins were very opposed to him. They were even opposed to Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi. Now, Gandhi was not a saint. Gandhi was another politician, but his technique and his kind of strategies and platforms varied from that of the Congress, which assumed the claim to be the mainstream of the mainly Hindu kind of opinion generally, not the Brahmins, but all the Hindu population. There was no platform, there was no party for the people that are now called kind of Dalits, or the scheduled castes they were called, and other people. So there were hundreds of millions of disenfranchised people that were denied any platform, any political say or voice. And any student, serious student of the period, let's say the 1920s onwards, can see and find the evidence that all the parties, of course, the Indian National Congress was the first one that the British sponsored, and they sponsored it in order to suit their imperialistic kind of plans, which would be better, if you like, continued and perpetuated with an alliance with the Brahmins and the Pandits of the Kashmir kind of Hindu background. The Pandits were encouraged to the point that Mountbatten, the uncle of the royal family, the monarch, Mountbatten allowed his wife to have a relationship with Jawaharlal Nehru. This was not a secret. This was absolutely open. And this was part of the British imperialists kind of making arrangements for the post-imperialist kind of role in the subcontinent. And they favored the Brahmins. They didn't favor the scheduled castes or the untouchables, the Dalits, and they didn't, of course, favor the Muslims. And they created all kinds of bogies, that is the false kind of personality to blame, let's say, a falsified kind of creature. And that included, of course, many Muslim activists, and they didn't have anything. So the fault lies with both the Muslims and the Hindu political organizers and leaders for playing the game or playing to the British thing, and for ignoring Subhash Bose, and for ignoring the Ali brothers, the Khilafat movement, and all the rest of it. So what they did, they marginalized the Ali brothers on the one hand, Subhash Bose on the other hand, and anybody else in the Dalits or the scheduled caste or the people in the Seven Sisters, that is the northeastern states of India today. Those regions are still absolutely deprived and discriminated against and are in struggle, economic, social, and democratic. So there are many thousands of questions every single day that arise because of the thousands of violations taking place in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. And we shall be looking factually, strictly speaking, factually, and in terms of the time and the context, and whenever anything comes up that needs updating in context, bearing in mind that narrative, that agenda. That agenda is to tell the truth. No historian that we know of now, if there is anyone who disagrees with anything we say, as I said, can put to us questions or comments or cite to us any accessible links that constitutes the disagreement and constitutes the basis of the kind of evidential disagreement. Otherwise, we are saying, and with those kind of provisions, we are saying that none of the academic kind of researchers or students or commentators in India, I say India first because of the numbers of people involved, which is far more than in India, in Pakistan or Bangladesh. That is the only reason. But qualitatively, and in terms of substance, none of the historians in India or linked to India from North America or other bases of the operations that we know of, because many of the people who say they are NRIs, that is the non-resident Indians, which is a complete travesty of the actual reality. They should not be insulted by that, and they should not accept that. They should say Indians living abroad. It's not non-resident. Non-resident kind of disqualifies them from a lot of other things. But there are operations in North America, in the USA, many states, California, New York, and other places, and in Canada, where operations are taking place in secret to support Modi and that kind of thing. Similar things are happening with Pakistan, but the numbers, as I said, because of the demographic size, etc., numbers are smaller. And the same thing is happening with Bangladesh. And because I am from Bangladesh, I know more about Bangladesh directly than I know about India or Pakistan. But whatever shortfalls there may be in terms of direct and indirect knowledge of facts, I make up by checking more the sources and the contents of issues and things to do with India and Pakistan. When I was in Calcutta for a few months, I noticed that there were literally hundreds. That I could find in Chowrangi. Chowrangi is the main kind of center, like Oxford Street. Not exactly the same because the map is different. The design and the architecture is different. But Chowrangi is the thoroughfare that I actually visited every day. And I was living in the Chittaranjan Avenue, which has been renamed since, I think. And the main reason for my visiting every day Chowrangi was the street stalls, book stalls in the street. I have not seen so many bookstores in any other city anywhere. I've been to Delhi, but nothing like Calcutta in terms of the availability of the bookstores in Calcutta, which is absolutely amazing in terms of the number, the diversity within the Indian context, of course, not diversity in terms of allowing dissent kind of thing in terms of the culture and the agenda. But the books that I did see, of course, I had to be limited by language because I didn't speak or read many of the languages. I did some, but not the majority of the languages in India. So I confined to the English language titles. Remember, this is an explanation for those who are watching this for the first time. So this should be saved and kind of used as a reference to what we stand for and what the backgrounds are, and factually. And this is part of the explanation of the project that we are doing uniquely. This is exclusive. Studying the behavior of the public kind of forces and agencies and institutions in those countries since August 1947 up to now, continuing. And when I was in Calcutta and checking, and every day there was at least one or two new titles being published, even in English. And in other languages, the number would be many times more. But even in the English language, the books that they published about Bangladesh, for example, I read about 100 books in the period that I was there. And in the 100 books that I read, that doesn't mean I read all the books or I found all the books. I read 100 books. And in all of those books, they suggested or they asserted that the Indian forces created Bangladesh, or India created Bangladesh. Now that is such a serious, outrageous, absolute lie. India, of course, played definitive parts especially after Indira Gandhi banned the flights, etc., and intervened with airstrikes and so on. But even if India gave air support, it could not liberate Bangladesh without the overwhelming involvement of the Bangladeshi people. Now why am I mentioning this? I'm not bothered about India making that claim at all. I am bothered about the fact that the implication of that for the people of Bangladesh. What does it say? So that is a question I'm raising there. And of course, the other point that I have been making for some time is for Pakistan's Imran Khan to apologize. He was not responsible. He was not in power. He was not even old enough, let's say. But he is now in power. And there is an absolute rare opportunity for him to make the start by apologizing for the atrocities of the Pakistan military done to children, women, and men, civilian people, during 1971, whatever you call the massacre. Some of the people call it genocide, but that has been disputed by scholars that have found inconsistencies in many things. But even if there are inconsistencies, it can be compared to a genocide because large numbers of people were victimized by massacres and murders and rapes and mutilations. Now, who gave them the right to do that, do any of that? Not just do that, but any of that. Imran Khan can say that he wasn't responsible. He was doing a statesman-like thing by starting this. He may be out of office whenever he goes out of office. And once he's out of office, this will be the thing that will make him proud or ashamed or embarrassed. If he does the apology, then he will be proud. And I'm saying this not as part of anything else, anybody else. It is my saying, and I've been saying it from the beginning. And as I said, unintended by me, I found myself present at a meeting at the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, where Zulfikar Bhutto was the overhyped guest speaker. And when he finished his speech, I asked him a simple question, which I do. I've asked questions of Morarji Desai and other people, heads of states and whatever, given the situation, given the place. The intention is to get the truth and get a truthful answer. So when I asked Bhutto a question, preliminary question, about his assertion or his suggestion, I can't remember the actual words, but the theme was that he was talking about the kind of, his background was that he has just been ousted or kicked out by Ayub Khan. Now, I'm not a fan of any of these people. Never have been and never will be because of what they did and what they stand for. But objectively speaking, compared to one with the other, I have a standing, I have a locus standi as an observer. And this is all I was doing because I wasn't present there as on behalf of anybody else. And when I asked Bhutto this contextual question about his emphasizing his importance, he was not important compared to most of the Pakistani political activists at all. And Bhutto's main capital, based on his arrogance, was his, of course, comparative wealth in Larkana and all the other things. So the other people in Pakistan allowed him to exhibit his arrogance by not subjecting him to sufficient critical analysis. I'm talking about the 1960s. And Bhutto, first of all, appeared to have not expected anybody from the audience in Dhaka, in East Pakistan at the time, to ask him any question, let alone dare to ask a question of the type that I did. I didn't challenge him. I asked him a factual question, but to him, it must have come as a challenge, as an effrontery. How dare an East Pakistani ask me a question at all in that way? I'm interpreting Bhutto's personality, looking at his performance at the United Nations, which was disgraceful and stupid and ignorant. As a kind of lecturer in law at the Southampton University for a short while or something, Bhutto showed tremendous, massive ignorance of the law when he spoke at the United Nations. So we'll come to that another time. But this time, I'm talking about Bhutto getting surprised by my questioning him. So he didn't answer the question I had asked. And I then followed up as an investigative, inquiring, objective journalist. I followed up and I followed up and I followed up and I followed up until the 9th question. When I asked him the 9th question, Bhutto knew that unless he considered and started to tell me the truth about his boastful, arrogant kind of presentation of himself, these questions will continue. That must have been clear to him. And anyone who has physically seen Bhutto would know that he got red, literally red. And he got red there. And he was wiping the sweat from his face. And then he stormed off the stage at the Institute of Engineers. And then he went to the Intercontinental Hotel not far from there. And then I flew back to Karachi or Lahore or Rawalpindi or wherever he was going. Bhutto was, by all accounts, very rich, came from the rich family. But he was also very, very unfit for public office. Not because he didn't know the basic literacy or he wasn't a good speaker or whatever. I mean, to many people, he must have been a good speaker, especially when he established the People's Party. But his ignorance came across when he refused to accept the election. Now, as I said before, I witnessed many wrong things being done during the day of the election in December 1970. But even adding all these wrong things together, even if the wrong things didn't happen or didn't have the kind of decisive outcome, it would still be one party that would have the overwhelming majority. And that is the Awami League. So that is the party. It's not because it's Awami League, but it is the party that got the majority votes, let's say. And the democracy depends on that, as has been exposed in the behavior of Trump in the USA many years later. But that is the kind of thing that happens when people don't accept the majority kind of opinion of the people. And Bhutto did that. Bhutto wasn't just threatening the members of the National Assembly elected in West Pakistan when he said that he would beat them up if they went to Dhaka. He was completely shoving two fingers to the election, to democracy. And that was a sick man, politically completely unfit. Nothing to do with what happened afterwards. Whenever this happened, whenever the election would have happened, and if he did that, it would be wrong. So Bhutto was unfit for office after that, and unfit for office throughout the period that he was in office. Not because he didn't kind of write English or he couldn't communicate to the foreign statespersons or whatever. But he was unfit because he had contempt for the people of Pakistan. And that has not been fully or even adequately discussed in Pakistan, what remains of Pakistan. And this is something that applies to newspapers like the Dawn, as I said. Unlike any other titles, the Dawn newspaper has a historic link. And those who are in control of the Dawn title have a historic duty to people outside of Pakistan. Because the ideal that the Dawn newspaper was a part of advocating, the ideal remains unfinished and undelivered. And anyone who is in control of the Dawn newspaper should be beginning, even now at this stage, beginning to account for the failure on the part of the Dawn newspaper to live and deliver the ideas, because no other paper is doing that. In Pakistan, the press, in Pakistan and Bangladesh as well, and in India, but less in India, and I'll come to that. The newspapers, so-called, are letting the people down. They're not telling the truth. And it's nothing to do with India, nothing to do with the kind of rivalry and whatever between India and Pakistan. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the country's government delivering to the country's people. It cannot be excused by the presence or continuation of any rivalry, espionage, and all the other stuff between India and Pakistan. Despite the fact that in India, the popular mythology is that the ISI is all powerful in Pakistan. I don't know what the extent of evidence there is, but even if it is significantly powerful, it doesn't matter. If the people are not delivered democracy, accountability, fairness, and freedom from poverty and injustice, then no matter of spying outfit is even mentionable. And the same applies to the RAW. I mean, RAW has been glorified. The research and analysis wing of the Indian, that is the counterpart of the Pakistan ISI, they've got the glorification by the Indian popular films. They've got even films called RAW. And those who have been producing those films, or rather, those who have been peddling those films as works of culture and cinema, should be ashamed of themselves, because they should not have anything to do with this. They should be talking objectively about the people and people's main demand about liberation and freedom from inequality, injustice in India. Now, I'm not moving to Bangladesh because I have yet to find any mentionable film produced in Bangladesh in the last, say, 20 years that has dealt with the duties owed to the people. I'm not talking about political parties, I'm talking about the duties owed to the people that are owed fruits, the fruits of liberation of 1971. I shall check and I shall comment on that as and when possible. Now, this commentary is produced mainly, this commentary, that is the diagnosis of Fleet Street, mainly by looking at newspapers like the ones here and relating to their kind of coverage or cover-ups of the events by the Boris Johnson fronted cabal or by the opposition fronted by the idiot Keir Starmer. Now let me say this before anyone kind of thinks that I'm exaggerating my kind of sternness against Keir Starmer. Before Keir Starmer left school, I've been conducting very real debates with all kinds of lawyers and law traders, licensed law traders, both within the academic field and outside and real life and in courts. And I can say that no licensed law trader produced by the four inns of court, that is the sources of the thing that they call barrister. Now in the subcontinent, mainly because of the extremely high level of advocacy skills that Ali Jinnah kind of exhibited in his time as a practicing, quote, barrister, the title barrister has become glorified and raised to the highest possible level. So most people who crave that title or are allowed to crave that title, or allowed to kind of cite that as their title, many of them, let's say not everyone, but many of them, because of the time, elapse of time, relate themselves to Ali Jinnah as a barrister, nothing to do with him being a politician, because that is less kind of universal, but he was accepted as a highly skilled and able barrister or lawyer, advocate. So that is a misleading kind of thing, because most of the people who kind of subconsciously compare themselves with Ali Jinnah are not even 1% as able as he was, let's say. So they shouldn't be doing that. And that is a misleading thing in the overall context of England itself. Because barristers are automatically supposed to be aware of the knowledge and the duties that come with this. But in practice, most barristers are literally defined as criminals, liars. And what they do is they abuse that title and the title's kind of attendant or accompanying access to the courts of law. They've got what is called the right of audience. That is to say, if somebody can call themselves barrister, then they are allowed to enter the court and plead or advocate or represent or stand for or speak for somebody. That is the license. And anyone who wants to know more about my thoughts based on investigation and evidence about the licensed law trade, need to study what I've said on hundreds of occasions. And what I've said on hundreds of occasions have included names and name checks, if you like. For example, one of the most kind of widely known and widely referred to persons, licensed law traders in the country in the last, let's say, 30 years has been Michael Mansfield. Now, that is the name, that is the hype, that is the image. But the reality of Michael Mansfield's kind of role in advocating rights and human rights, the reality is very different. He's another licensed liar. And I said that for the record and ask either Mansfield or any of his stooges to come and challenge me on the facts. I mean, I spoke to him only once, and then I tested him, his actual veracity. I spoke to him very briefly in Chancery Lane, but I then gave him the opportunity to show me evidence that he actually practices many of these slogans that he kind of spews as part of his business. And he failed the test. So Michael Mansfield is not the only one. I mean, David Pennick is one of the other ones, but Pennick is less known than Mansfield, and Pennick is less notorious, if you like, as a maker of claims about himself. But Mansfield does that. Mansfield messed up, for example, the case of the campaign against the racists who murdered Stephen Lawrence in 1993. And Mansfield delayed the campaign significantly. And anyone who wants to know more about what I think of the licensed law trading liars, both barristers and solicitors, can ask me specific questions. But before they ask me any question, they must identify themselves fully and verifiably. If that is not the case, they will not get the answer, because we need to know that they are genuine and independent of anybody else. But essentially, the diagnosis of Fleet Street and diagnosis of the kind of agenda they follow and the diagnosis of the role of the corrupt judicial bureaucracy has come into fore in the last fortnight in a way that it had not done for a very long time. And I'll start by referring to Meghan Markle, of course, because although racism is a daily occurrence in the UK and it is experienced by everyone, including me, every single day, it is not acknowledged, even as a factor in the coverage, even as a word in the Fleet Street papers or in the media. And racists have recently been emboldened by Donald Trump and the other racists and fascists, and they have invented two words that hides their racism but does the job of rallying them together. One is woke, W-O-K-E. They call anyone who is opposed to racism and fascism and sexism and so on woke. That is to say, they say that these people who are opposed to racism and sexism are kind of denying free speech or freedom of speech, as happened with the corrupt racist crook Piers Morgan, who stormed off the ITV studio after being exposed in a live kind of conversation by the weather presenter on the ITV, Alex Beresford. And what is happening with the woke thing is that they are using the woke as a platform for all the racists. So all the racists are pleading or crying absolutely falsely that they are the victims of denial and persecution and repression and obstruction and all the rest of it. And the other thing is the act, is the verb. They say cancel culture. They say the woke brigade are cancelling culture. That is to say, stopping people from having the right or access to freedom of speech. For example, the Oxford University has got a debating kind of thing, which is a completely pretentious, bogus absolutely racist and stupid and dishonest. But it's a kind of propaganda platform that the Oxford University allows to promote the idea that Oxford University houses a platform for freedom of speech. So they have Tommy Robinson, one of the nastiest, racist, hateful, anti-Muslim. He's not just a racist, but his racism is based on his dedication to hating Muslims. He is from Luton in Bedfordshire in the south of England, and he collected evidence to justify his opposition to Muslims, mainly the Muslims in Bedford, not all, but significant numbers of Muslims in Bedford and Luton are from Pakistani background or maybe parts of Kashmir. But essentially they're Muslims. I mean, generally, they're not fanatic Muslim, but the fact that they're Muslims is unacceptable to Tommy Robinson. And Tommy Robinson has been one of the, if you like, figures that the racists have used to illustrate their lie as the truth, that the anti-racists and opponents of the likes of Tommy Robinson are denying freedom of speech. Now, Robinson is a proven liar. I mean, literally proven liar. Now, with the denial by Diana's eldest son, that one, that the royal family is not a racist family. Let's look at the psychology of that statement. If he were against racism, he would say that the royal family is opposed to racism. But he's not saying that. He's saying that we are not. That is a defensive running away from the actual truth statement. And that's a tragedy, because this child, who was the subject of worldwide sympathy when Diana was murdered, should not have turned out like that. And he has. I mean, with his brother being on the opposite side, not because his brother is fundamentally of a different culture or cultural outlook, whatever, as the evidence of the various utterances that Harry made, has made, show that he is as stupid as Wills. But his stupidity is being ameliorated, that is to say, curtailed, and being replaced by a sort of education because of his marriage, because of his meeting with Meghan Markle and his marriage, and the fact that he has been kind of penalized by the racist royal family has only confirmed the need for such education. So Harry is undergoing education. Whatever he does, whatever happens in the years to come or periods to come, we cannot say at this stage literally, but one thing is very certain. This is an experience that will have significant impact on his life. And Harry would never revert to kind of form as a racist like Wills still is. Now, Wills is the one who is lined up. When Brenda eventually retires or is off the scene, whatever happened to Brian, I mean, Wills is being kind of lined up. Even before Diana was murdered, Wills was being lined up by the commentary or commentariat as the appropriate heir to the throne, because in the years before Diana was murdered, it was quite clear that Diana was being targeted and cornered and pushed out of the royal family. That was absolutely certain. And Morton, the writer, the first writer of the book that was published about Diana, has said that what Meghan is being kind of subjected to is reminiscent of, that is reminding people of what the royal family did and the press did, the Fleet Street did to Diana. And Morton has said also that it seems that they haven't learned the lesson. That is, neither Fleet Street nor the Brenda family have learned the lesson of what they did to Diana and what the impact was. Remember what I said about Brenda saying that it was the kind of horrible year for her after the Diana murder and the impact of worldwide public repugnance against the royal family, she then issued the statement. It's the national kind of Christmas statement or speech, in which she said that she had endured a horrible year, and she put it in Latin, annus horribilis. Now this child, Wills, is still an instrument of somebody else, and she is the instrument of Carol Middleton, mother of Kate Middleton. These are the people that have engineered the most brazen attacks on Meghan Markle. And that is why Wills, although he's in his 30s, he is completely infantile in this statement, because it will go down. He cannot unmake that statement. He cannot unsay it. We are not a racist family. Of course you are. If you weren't racist, then you would have said that we are opposed to racism. We are opposing racism, and we shall bring an end to racism in the royal family. They haven't said that. Similarly, Brenda, in her statement, said yesterday, as reported, or as peddled by the servile Fleet Street yesterday, she said that yesterday, in the previous 48 hours, let's say, she said that the allegation about racism is concerning. She didn't say that we are very sorry that any such accusation could be made, because we are opposing racism, and opposed to racism, we never would allow racism. And we say sorry to the Duchess or Meghan and Harry. Duchess and Meghan, because she is the direct target of the racism, and Harry because he is being penalized, he is punished by the rest of the royal family and the Fleet Street for marrying this black woman, or the woman of mixed racial backgrounds. It is incredible, isn't it, that the walking out of the ITV studio by Piers Moron, Moron, not Morgan, Piers Moron, his record is one of a moron. I'm not saying it because it's easy to distort his name, Piers Morgan to moron. That is a pun that is possible, but I would not make that pun at all if I didn't see evidence. He's been a journalist, in the sleaziest and the sleazier parts of Fleet Street. A significant part of his years, so-called journalism years, were spent at the Scum, the Sun, owned by the dirty digger, Rupert Murdoch. And whatever he did there was nothing to do with morality or ethics. The Sun newspaper is a sub-pornographic newspaper. The most notorious part of its pornography was in the perpetuation for decades of Page 3, where the literally naked girls, young girls, were kind of imaged in order to attract the lowest caliber of people, readers, and the majority of the gullibles among the Little Englanders population. And that is the basis for Rupert Murdoch's making the empire, the $1 billion or £1 billion empire, because he made the most of his money by this scum. And then he moved on to the USA with the loot, and became owner of the New York Daily News, which is absolutely styled in contents of the role and even language resembles this scum, that is the Sun, New York Daily News. And then he moved on to own things like Fox News, which for the 5 years sustained Trump in his corrupt, anti-Muslim, anti-migrant, pro-racist, pro-fascist reign. And during Trump's kind of reign in the White House of the 4 years. More than 100, 200 books and documentaries and exclusive reports, insider stories have appeared showing Trump as the worst possible human being in terms of society, in terms of democracy, in terms of constitutionality, in terms of fairness, in terms of decency. I say decency because he openly not only kind of insulted women in the most graphic, completely corrupt way, but he also boasted about his daughter that he would sleep with her if she weren't his daughter. Now, nobody knows whether he did go through the details, the remainers, and did sleep with his daughter. Nobody knows that. And nobody has actually come on the record as far as we can see. But the fact that he could even say that showed how bad and how low Trump was. Why am I talking about Trump? Because the Fleet Street papers that are attacking Meghan, remember, the Fleet Street papers and the editors that are attacking Meghan Markle were worshipping such a person, Donald Trump. So look at the lowest level that they have been existing on. So these papers haven't got the moral, let alone the evidential. They haven't got the evidential right to attack Meghan Markle for pointing out something that has been so obvious and has been taking place every single day of every single year. I mean, racism is a daily occurrence for most people who are targets of racism. Denial, obstruction, incredulity. And when Piers Morgan says that about Meghan Markle's experiencing mental health pressures, saying that she didn't think that she didn't want to live anymore, or she didn't want to be alive anymore. He said, Morgan or Moron, that he didn't believe a word of her. How does he know? How does he know what that person felt? There is no way he could say that. Absolutely not. And he did say that. So these are the people, these are kind of actual living kind of embodiments of the total and totality of darkness and dark age that we live in, we exist in. So our campaign, this particular channel, is part of the movement and the campaign to bring in the light into the darkness. That's what we are doing. And when Will says that we are not a racist family, he comes out as a racist, in denial. And the Society of Editors, or newspaper editors, is led by people like Paul Decker. Decker is spelled D-A-C-R-E. Paul Decker, for many, many years, has been editor of the Daily Mail. And although somebody has said that the Daily Mail website is the world's most popular and most visited website of any newspaper in the world, that person forgot or failed to mention the fact, the reason why the Daily Mail's website is visited by the most number of people in the world. And that reason is, like this scum, the Daily Mail's website is not visited by people for news. That person failed to mention that, or chose not to mention that, or didn't understand that. The truth is that anyone who wants to check what I'm about to say, they can go online, Mail Online, Daily Mail, and they can look at the right-hand side, the column. And it is pornographic. It's full of naked or semi-naked women's bodies. That is exactly what the scum did. And that is the attraction. It's not the contents, because the contents are not. Most of the contents on the news side are not exclusive or kind of unlike the Daily Mail, the print Daily Mail or the Daily Mail website. And most of these women are white women in their 20s and 30s, and it's to do with the fact that there are naked bodies there of women. And it's a kind of 75% pornographic. 75% pornographic and 25% not so pornographic. So what we are saying is that the contents of the newspapers, the Fleet Street newspapers, kind of defeat or contradict the assertion that they're newspapers, because they're not running news. They are kind of hectoring, they're harassing, they're bullying anyone who wants them to tell the truth, and anyone who is targeted by their lying and lies and distortion and denial. For example, in the run up to and around the broadcast of Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey, the Daily Mail on one day dedicated 26 pages. Now, even if they had repeated word for word everything that had been said in the interview, they would not need 25 pages. And yet they did. And there is nobody in the parliament in Britain, either the so-called House of Peers, which is not elected and remains as a festering legacy of undemocracy and corruption and bribery, because all the criminals that have given any money to the Conservatives are in the House of Lords, House of Peers, we call it. And the reason is that we don't believe that anyone other than God or divine kind of entity should be called Lord. Now, what is happening with the House of Commons, which is kind of democracy, residual democracy, let's say, because although the House of Commons is elected, the process of election, the process of nomination, process of selection of candidates, completely corrupt, absolutely corrupt. So there is no forum that is not corrupt. There is no forum and platform that is not kind of biased and dishonest and racist. So where do people go to find the truth? It's a combination of things. It's a struggle. Like the Ali brothers said in the Khilafat movement, we are not doing this as a part of the revival for the Khilafat movement at all. It's just a literal kind of extract or extrapolation of the phrase that they devised and they made popular. One of the Ali brothers, either Shaukat Ali or Muhammad Ali, said that the period in the subcontinent under the British rule was like living in the age of darkness, ayyam-e jahiliyat. Now, that was the time when the Prophet was born and the Holy Quran was revealed to him, and all the details of the Islamic kind of movement began. And the reason why that was chosen, that part of the world, was because that was at that time the most backward part of the world. That is the reason. Not because inherently, historically, that land was superior to anyone else, and therefore the arrival of the Prophet and the start of the Islamic faith from there should be equated with the land being superior to others. That's not the case. It was the opposite. The place was absolutely sunk in darkness. So it needed to be enlightened. Now that purpose is continuing in this, not only because it is connected with Islam, but any enlightening process associated with any faith or no faith, any movement, is something that we subscribe to universally. So that's the introduction so far. And we go to the police facing inquiry on this very heartbreaking item. This young woman was murdered. I mean, you cannot describe the pain the parents and the family are going through. She was only going home after visiting a friend. And what happens? She was murdered by a policeman. Can you make it any more brutal and cruel and unbelievable? The only thing I can add to this is that since the foundation of the police in Britain, in England, the police force has been treated as immune from accountability. I mean, how could a policeman even think of committing such a crime? But this one appears to have been doing other crimes as well, including being one of the people in the Metropolitan Police Force against whom complaints had been made only days previous to the disappearance of this victim. And the complaints were for him against him on the basis of his exposing him, indecent exposure. Took away his clothes, took off his clothes and exposed himself. How could the police do that? Now, this is only a tip of the iceberg because there is no public kind of published account of how many serving police persons are being under investigation for crimes or having been found to have been kind of responsible for crimes, whatever. And that is part of the kind of corruption inherent in the behavior of the racist Fleet Street. Because if a black person were kind of suspected of having done anything even less gruesome than that against a police person, then Fleet Street would suspend everything else. And they would splash, that is, run big sized letters on the front page, demanding that all the black people should be deported or something. That is the level of hatred. That is the level of hatred that is festered in and by the Fleet Street newspapers. And that actually includes the Daily Mirror Group newspapers. And the fact that this is such an empty place, that is to say, there is no call for the police to be brought into accountability, means that society is not safe because police are given unlimited powers de facto in the name of keeping the society secure and safe. Suppose this woman, Sarah Everard of Brixton, this woman, suppose she had mistaken this police person and approached him for help against somebody shadowy following her only few yards behind. Supposing she approached this person who had, of course, uniform and police ID and everything on him. I mean, she would be doing the most natural thing. Because if you are afraid of being followed or under attack or under kind of being stalked by a possible criminal, then the first thing you do or think of doing is to go to the police or call the police. Or if a police person is in sight, then you approach them and seek help with them. Would she ever think that she would be murdered by that police person? And that she has been, according to the reports so far, because the policeman has been arrested on suspicion of murder. And there is no narrative. Not in the Guardian, not in the Times, not in the other papers, not in the BBC, not in Sky News or on Channel 4. And the pretentiousness of the Channel 4 news we shall come to in due course, not necessarily in this part. Because as I said, I was one of the founders of the campaign to set up the Channel 4. Not because I had any business agenda. I always had a democratic, ethical, moral agenda. And the reason why I became part of the movement, I'm not the only one that But I became part of the movement because of the then corruption of the BBC, BBC One and BBC Two, and ITV. These are the channels that existed at the time in the 1970s. And I was among the people who submitted kind of comments to what was called the Anand Committee on the Future of Broadcasting. Anand was the name of Gabriel Anand, who was the academic from the London University. And Anand produced the report, and that report was effectively kind of used as the basis for legislation ushering in the Channel 4 channel, which began broadcasting at the beginning of the 1980s. But immediately as it began broadcasting, I immediately got engaged in confrontation with the then chief executive of Channel 4, Jeremy Isaacs. Isaacs was a racist, lying creep, typical professional racist from Oxbridge. And I openly called him a liar at a news conference held at the Charlotte Street headquarters of Channel 4 at that time. Charlotte Street is not far from the Tottenham Court Road or Oxford Street. That is in that same district, let's say. And I then published various kind of accounts of my disgust with the lies by Channel 4 itself and Jeremy Isaacs. Anyone can look up Isaacs. He has got all kinds of titles after his name, but he's a crook. He's a typical establishment crook. And Channel 4 has been a disaster and a denial of the kind of service to bringing enlightenment to the cause and the reality of journalism and broadcasting that we had campaigned for, or those of us who took part in the movement had demanded. It has not delivered. So, back to the Fleet Street papers of today, and we shall come back to what they did with the Supreme Court ruling against Shamima Begum. Now, this shows that the police cannot be trusted. This shows police cannot be trusted as a safe kind of resort for ensuring safety for women like Sarah Everard or other people. Now, Shamima Begum, of course, is not going to be treated in that way because compared to Sarah Everard, Shamima Begum's image has been created around the mythology that Fleet Street actually supports. But in this case, I have to say the Bangladeshis in the UK, generally, and the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets, apart from me, that is, and I make the distinction. The Bangladeshi funded leaders, community leaders so-called, the Bangladeshi so-called imams, and the Bangladeshi other kind of traders of Islam and Muslim or whatever, they have betrayed the children, including Shamima Begum and the two others with her that were photographed for the first time in public as having crossed into Syria in February 2015. From February 2015, the time of that publication, up to this February 26th, when the Supreme Court finally published its opposition to Shamima Begum's claim to British citizenship by birth. So that is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 6 calendar years. For 6 calendar years, the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets, let's begin with Tower Hamlets, has treated Shamima Begum as if she didn't exist. Of course, she did exist, but they chose to pretend that she didn't exist for the community. I'm making a very serious, significant, substantial, factual assertion. Now, what duty did they owe to this child, or or to these three children, because three girls aged 15 at the time when they were photographed as having crossed into Syria. The fact that they completely, instantly, robotically, mechanically, in a reflex way of subservience to the racist narrative, they completely switched off. And they pretended that didn't exist a connection between them and these three children, these three girls. What did it show? This showed the complete brainwashed state of these Muslim leaders, Muslim imams, mosque committee persons, and so on. I start with the Muslim ones, because the whole thing about Shamima Begum and the other two girls is to do with so-called Islam, or so-called exercise of so-called practice of Islam. It has nothing to do with Islam. The so-called extremists or radicals, we don't know them, but we have not seen anything democratic about whatever they're doing or not doing. We have no connection. We don't know anything other than what is available in the mainstream media, and the evidence is absolutely absent that they were doing anything Islamic, anything to do with Islam or Islamic, or let alone universal. So why did the leaders, the Muslim leaders, decide that Shamima Begum and the two other girls didn't deserve support from, recognition from them as community, quote, leaders? What did they base their distancing from her and denying her of all support and recognition? On what evidence? I've been saying this for a number of days, and I'm repeating this today, updated form. And I say again, what evidence did they actually find that Shamima Begum and those two girls didn't deserve their support when they needed the support most, or when they needed the support the most, to put it correctly in the grammatical form? Because there is no evidence after these 6 calendar years, since they were first publicly reported in the mainstream news as having crossed into Syria. Up to this day, today is the 12th of March, 2021, and there is no evidence, there is no report, there is no account, there is no claim that these children, when they were children, committed any crime. Think about that. Why then did the Muslim leaders treat these children as if they had committed not just crimes, but serious mega crimes? What were those crimes that they thought these children had committed? They hadn't, and they still haven't been named as having committed any crimes. Now, 6 calendar years is a long time. And in that time, or in the time between that, the first report of these children, these girls having crossed into Syria, and Sajid Javid in post, whenever he did that, removing the citizenship from Shamima Begum, the citizenship that she was entitled to as a child born in England, as a England-born, English-born, England-born person. There was no evidence. But in that time, many perpetrators of serious offenses have been tried and found guilty and sentenced to various types of punishment or whatever, and none of their citizenship has been taken away from them. Think about that. What does it show? It is evidence, it's factual. So why did the Supreme Court think that the Home Secretary or the Home Office had any right to balance Shamima Begum's right to fair trial or fair hearing and kind of British citizenship on the one hand, and the requirements or the needs for national security on the other, which was the one that was given complete priority by the Supreme Court, which denied Shamima Begum even the right to return to present her judicial review challenge to the Home Secretary, removing her citizenship. This is something that none of the Fleet Street commenters has mentioned. And this is nothing to do with any crime. This is not anything. Not only has she been not accused, she has not been tried, she has not been kind of given any opportunity to produce any evidence in her defense, as she is entitled to do, according to various international declarations, constitutional law, human rights, declarations, conventions, agreements, and so on. This is an area that is full of contradictions that are fundamentally kind of opposed. In the, when I say area, I mean the activities, the role, the behavior, the practice of the UK courts bureaucracies. They are not consistent. First of all, they're not consistent generally, and secondly, they're not consistent with even other declarations that the UK claims to subscribe to and to be prepared to observe, not flout or violate, which it has done in the case of Shamima Begum. Now, anyone who is not resident and who has never lived in the UK, and most certainly anyone who is not a kind of practicing lawyer or law trader, or anyone who is not a very fully aware of the details of the English jurisprudence, needs to know this one, that no lawyer, no licensed law trading barrister, nor solicitor, nor legal executive has any evidence with which to kind of try to, let's say, mislead a person who is not aware of the legal kind of details or the legal so-called bureaucracies. Because there is no mysterious, what I'm saying is, there is no mysterious place, there is no mysterious source or origin to justify illegal behavior under the cloak, under the pretense, under the banner, or under the image or headline of doing some one law. That is to say, one law doesn't justify breaking the other law. That's what I'm saying. Nobody else has said that. But that is what the actual truth is about the role played by the corrupt, racist, and anti-Muslim, in this context about Shamima Begum, behavior of the UK Supreme Court. And this conflict between one law being used or abused or exploited to break other law or other laws, this is the biggest explosive kind of lying practice that is going on every day in the, or every sitting, or every decision that is made by most of the courts. I have appeared before a number of crooks sitting as judges, and they are really deficient and they are really ignorant. And some of my appearances have been contested because they said that I didn't have the right to appear, and I have asserted the right and I have appeared. And my findings and my denunciations on the facts of their behavior remain absolutely outstanding. That is to say, they have not been legally or lawfully refuted by any of these criminals and racists and lie are sitting as judges. That is for the record. Anyone watching this who wants to challenge me on the facts is most welcome, but only if they have the evidence to challenge me. Not because they don't like to hear what I'm saying, but they have to have the evidence. Neutral, universal, objective, verifiable, substantial, and substantiatable evidence. Say, I've talked about Michael Mansfield. I go back a bit again to discuss Michael Mansfield. Now, Mansfield is one of the permanent fixtures in the inquiries kind of business. Various inquiries set up by government to deny the truth and whatever. And Michael Mansfield has been paid millions of pounds over his career. But if you look at the actual evidence, the contents of those inquiries and contents of what Michael Mansfield has been saying, you will find that he's completely empty of substance in the main. I mean, the highlight of the emptiness of Michael Mansfield came across when he pretended to be representing the case against the racist murderers of Stephen Lawrence. Anyone can look up the history. I don't have to give the actual details of everything that happened, but essentially Michael Mansfield was exposed as a racist white man who was kind of invading the space of a family of a victim of racism, a black man, black youth, and both of his parents, Jamaican parents. He had no substance, he has no commitment, he has no dedication. And when there was a significant public outcry about the racist murdering Stephen Lawrence, it was followed by an inquiry about the police role and all the rest of it. Because the police failed and the police knew who the murderers were and they failed. So the inquiry was set up with the heading of this man called Macpherson. Now, Macpherson was not the first such ex-judge to be appointed to look into racist incidents. The previous one was, of course, Scarman. And Scarman was appointed after the 1981 so-called riots. And I'll come to Scarman in a second. But Macpherson, his main legacy has not been about the kind of lack of accountability that the suspected murderer, Metropolitan Policeman, murder of Sarah, kind of raises or concerns. That is to say, there was no real examination of the lack of accountability by the police and the operation of the kind of license to immunity and impunity given to the police. They were above the law, they were not held to account. Now, this case, of course, is one of many that shows that to be completely unacceptable and overdue for replacement by an actual transparent regime of accountability that is relatable to human life and ordinary life in the street and in the society. So Macpherson said, instead of dealing with any of this, Macpherson said, just like Williams, this one is doing it. So Williams is actually reminding of Macpherson, because Macpherson said, when the argument was put that the individual police personnel involved in the negligence towards Stephen Lawrence were racist, and others who were not named but who were known or identifiable in the whole setting of the letdown and betrayal of the family of Stephen Lawrence. that they were racist and they were racistly negligent to do their duties. McPherson said they were not racist. McPherson said that the Metropolitan Police was not racist, but it was institutionally racist. Now listen to this. It's absolutely crafty. Crafty, that is, very dishonest and very much pro-racist. And all the Bangladeshis, well, Bangladeshi, that is to say, all the Asian people, all the African origin people, and all the so-called anti-racists at that time, who were generally tuning into the various stages of the McPherson inquiry's proceedings, they swallowed this lie, all of them, absolutely all of them. I am saying all of them, not me, but the others, all of them. Because the word institutional racism was introduced by McPherson, and he replaced individuals being racist. Now, listen to the operation of that crafty device of denial and racism. If you call the police institutionally racist, then you can't hold anyone accountable in the police for racism, because it's institutional. It's not an individual. Think about that. And you go deeper into that distinction and you will find that that was in itself a racist denial. And this is what I'm saying about Williams. By not saying that we are appalled, number one, we are appalled at being at all suggested that we are racist. We are actively against racism and we shall do everything immediately to end racism. He is saying we are not racist. So if he is not racist, or collectively, then you can't do anything about it. That's what is happening. And that's what happened with the inquiry, overhyped inquiry with McPherson. And its role, the McPherson inquiry, the role of McPherson inquiry into the murder and the role of the police, the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and the role of the Metropolitan Police was that no action could be taken against the police, and wasn't. So, when Meghan Markle said that she had serious kind of thoughts of not wanting to live anymore, that feeling is shared by people who have been under pressure for any reason. And for example, as we have said, the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, the actual name as we have edited it, the Deprivation, Want and Poverty Creation, which is the UK central government department that operates poverty creation and denial of rights and so on, called Department for Work and Pensions. Now that is a name that was created during Tony B. Lyer in his first years since getting elected into government in May 1997. Only 3 calendar months before Diana was murdered in that Paris subway. And the DWP was when the Conservatives took over the government in May 2010. The DWP became the kind of target for vilification and attacks and became an instrument for murder of the poorest people, or the most in need people, the most vulnerable people. And the fact that this was going on, the murders of these people, was concealed by Fleet Street. Fleet Street didn't mention the massacre that was taking place by withdrawing the benefits from the most in need of benefit. And the significant numbers of the people who committed suicide were being treated to sanctions. That is to say, their allocated benefits by the DWP were being withheld from them. So they were left with no money to live on. And not only that, they were left with bruising, traumatizing kind of character assassination that the DWP officials made of them by calling them liars. Remember what I'm saying? This is the term liar used by Piers Morgan against Meghan Markle. He said, when she said that she felt like not living anymore, being alive anymore. That is to say, she was saying that she felt suicidal. Moron said that she was lying, which is exactly what the DWP under the Conservatives and under the Finance Minister George Osborne, Prime Minister David Cameron and Finance Minister George Osborne, the DWP branded the people who were desperate for money and desperately ill and were being denounced by the DWP as liars, which denunciations were followed by several thousand of those claimants committing suicide. Now, could anyone say that any of these people were lying? How could they say that? On what evidence? The only evidence of their integrity and the reality of their situation came to be recognized only when it was too late, when they had committed the suicides. And all the evidence known to kind of counseling groups that try to help people who are emotionally, mentally in that kind of state, all the evidence suggests that it's absolutely impossible to know for certain at what stage this feeling would deteriorate, to what extent and how. So it is only the person and only the actually eventual evidence of their feeling, as low as Meghan Markle said she felt. Nobody else could make any comment. Nobody else was in a position or is in a position to make any comment about that person feeling that way at that time or at similar times over a period, if it went on for any period. So Piers Morgan was appearing as a presenter on a daytime morning television program, mainstream television program on ITV, after the interview. After the interview with Meghan was broadcast on Oprah Winfrey's program by CBS, the American channel or network. And he said repeatedly words to the effect that, and actually, that he didn't believe a word of Meghan Markle. I mean, quite apart from the severity of the impact of denial, it was also in breach of her personal rights on so many levels. He had no right to make such a comment, not about Meghan Markle only, but about anybody else making any similar statement. It's against the law to make such a definitive kind of comment denouncing or denying somebody's statement of truth of their experience. And in fact, any intelligent, kind of sensitive and sensible so-called journalist in Britain at this time would have hesitated, very, very seriously hesitated, before making any comment about that disclosure. The only comment that anyone could make about Meghan Markle making that statement about how she felt under the racist and other bullying and pressures and distancing and being cornered by Buckingham Palace was to show sympathy, dignity, dignified sympathy, and actual admiration for the way that she was able to, or she managed to survive that. That would be the least any decent thinking, rational journalist would do, or observer would do, or commentator would do. But Piers Morgan didn't do that. He treated her cry or recollection of her cry for help and support and understanding as her crime, her offense. How dare she, was his view of contempt towards her. And what he was saying there, funnily enough, as the racists would say, actually coincided with the view as reported, not far apart from that, as being the view held by Brenda. She said, recollections may vary. I mean, imagine a person, woman or man, on a dinghy in the English Channel, as they say, crossing from France towards England, because there is no other legal means available to them. So they're doing this to avoid detection, but they are seeking asylum or refuge. And imagine they're being drowned, because so many people have drowned doing the same or trying to do the same. And one woman has just survived a drowning or a boat that sank not far from the coast. Imagine her telling anyone that she has just survived that. And imagine her being told that she is a liar. Every index, every indication that is material, that is physical, about people crossing in dinghies and other unsecure, unsafe boats and vehicles trying to cross the channel. Every index, every indication, every sign, every movement, every physical factor, wind, storm, whatever, waves, all of those point to the fact that a very large number of boats and vehicles and dinghies sink, drowning the passengers. This has been going on for too many years and too long. Now, the fact that people wanting to get kind of refuge or asylum in the UK by crossing into England from France is because the UK and France jointly, currently, and have been for a very long time, breaking their international law agreements, duties, by breaking the requirements to make sure that people like that, people put in that kind of desperate position, should be given immediate refuge, both in France and in England. That is a legal requirement based on both the countries, UK and France, actively being signatories to various declarations and agreements in the international sphere. So, whatever criteria you try, or whatever investigative or legal or constitutional or humanitarian criteria you look at and examine, you will find that the treatment of Meghan Markle, as the treatment of Shamima Begum, as the treatment of those seeking to cross into England, has got one thing common, which is racist. And racists in power, in government, have been doing what even racists in common kind of field in the society outside of government would not be allowed to do. For example, the daughter of a Gujarati origin family that was kicked out by an East African country, Priti Patel, she is a daughter. She is born here in England, but she is the daughter of migrants like that, asylum seekers, migrants, whatever. She is now repeatedly tried to send the US, UK kind of armed forces, Air Force and the Navy into the channel in order to stop these desperate people seeking asylum. Now, this is not a lie, but to Pierce moron, this is not happening. This is what this woman is doing, this Priti Patel, Asian woman, doing to Asian people, African people. So it's not just Pierce moron, it is the likes of Priti Patel, and it's the likes of Sajid Javid. Remember, Sajid Javid was hyped into kind of right-wing coverage in the right-wing media in Fleet Street. Wrongly, but that is how they opportunistically painted him. They said that the fact that he was a frontbencher in the Conservative Party in Parliament showed that the Conservative Party was practicing diversity and was not racist. That's what they were saying. And they were saying that Sajid Javid was one of the persons in public life who was the son of a Pakistani-born bus driver. So they were saying that the fact that a Pakistani-born bus driver's son could become an MP and a minister and so on proved that there was no racism, there was no discrimination. That was the whole line. But that is a complete lie, because the first man that betrayed basic universal human rights and freedom, the general under Nawab Sirajuddaulah in June 1757, was Mir Zafar Ali Khan, or Khan, otherwise known as Mir Zafar. Now, he betrayed the whole of the subcontinent and he let in the British Empire. So the fact that somebody was kind of from India or at that time Indian didn't stop him from behaving in the worst possible anti-Indian way at that time. And it goes on. So Priti Patel is behaving against most of the migrants from Asia and Africa, as is Sajid Javid. So as I said yesterday again, not for the first time, that if Sajid Javid complained that he is being called by wrongly he said, the left. It's not the left. Anyone who knows the truth, including people who say they're left-wingers, that he's a coconut. He complained that he was a coconut. I said to him on the 4th of May 2018, in my speech at the Altawali Park, on the anniversary of Altawali's murder by racists in 1978, on the 4th of May 1978, I said to Sajid Javid in a public speech that if Sajid Javid complained of being called a coconut, then he should stop behaving like a coconut. That is the first step he could take. Instead of heeding my advice from Brick Lane, from Tower Hamlets, he then moved on to strip a Tower Hamlets girl of her British citizenship. It's a direct kind of telling me with his two fingers, and he was not even a Tommy Robinson. He was not a white-skinned racist. He was a Pakistani bus driver's son. Taking away the British nationality by birth from a school child, Shamima Begum, born in Tower Hamlets, and led down by the local Tower Hamlets Council under the safeguarding the children's duties the Tower Hamlets Council owed to her and still owes to her for all those years and all the consequences that she and her friends have been caused and suffered. As I say, if there is any evidence, any objectively, internationally, legally verifiable evidence that Shamima Begum or any of our school friends of the time committed any crime, serious crime, any crime, and that they were prosecuted and that they were found guilty of any of those crimes, then I would, of course, revise my commentary. But none of these girls has been prosecuted for any crime, and none of them has been tried. None of them has been found guilty of any crime. So she is innocent of any crime, okay? Let's leave that one there and move back to the Tower Hamlets Council's role and ask the council to publish all the evidence of what they did to safeguard this child and the other two girls. And the evidence showing why they failed to do the safeguarding duties. And the evidence, what law justified them being silent on their failing Shamima Begum and the duties they owed to her. And we shall be coming back to Shamima Begum in due course. Here is the Daily Mail front page on the Friday, the 12th of March 2021. And the Daily Mail is the most racist British tabloid from Fleet Street. And the splash on the front page is that William blasts back at race slur. And William says that royal family is not racist and Queen and Charles support him. And then on the right, it has got a picture of Kate Middleton and says that she and Williams are showing what duty really means. Now, this is a lie because this is not what duty means. Duty is not to deny racism that exists. Duty is not to harass this black woman out of the royal family. The duty is not to distance her from the rest of the family. The duty is not to ask her questions about the blackness of the child that Meghan is about to give birth to. And this is all in denial, and they are not running. This front page space they've given to the racists should have been given to the victim of the Metropolitan Policeman's murder of her. That is what the Daily Mail is doing. They're diverting attention from the police's role and going back to promoting racists. And there is a picture, there is a pathetic picture of Kate Middleton being pictured with a mixed race child in front of her. This is the proof that they have got no racism, and they have got picture of a black woman accompanying Kate and Wills. Now, let's say this on the record. Of the hundreds of thousands of photographs that Fleet Street has published since Williams and Kate have been married or have been dating, you cannot find pictures of them with black people. Not like this, because this is just, and the camera is closest to this black woman. The camera in this picture is closest to this black woman, and what they're showing is that shows that they're not racist. Now, even starting from Abraham Lincoln, who is supposed to be the greatest American president, even starting from Abraham Lincoln's, who was a racist and who had African slave woman kind of as his mistress, there are kind of thousands of racists in the USA who have had children with women descendants of slaves. That doesn't make those racists any less racist. And that didn't make Abraham Lincoln any less racist, despite the mythology that he was a Democrat and he saved the country and he was against slavery and all the rest of it. He wasn't. And what we are looking at here is the campaign of orchestration of denial of racism. And when the Supreme Court actually ruled in behaving as a rubber stamp for the Home Secretary and the racist kind of order that was written for Sajid Javid, who only acted as a stooge for the racists when he took away the British by birth citizenship from Shamima Begum. The Supreme Court actually committed a number of crimes. This is what I'm saying on this program. Nobody has said that, but this is what I am saying. This is what we are saying. The Supreme Court has committed a number of crimes, offenses, quite apart from the individual that has been affected by this. This is the list of the illegalities and crimes that the Supreme Court has committed. Number one, the Supreme Court has not mentioned, the phenomenon of race. This is illegality because according to the various declarations and conventions and agreements, international agreements that the UK is signatory to, and when I say that UK is a signatory to, it means that UK institutions, agencies like the courts are obliged to obey the requirements of the declarations signed, whatever the number of declarations. And this denial shows that the existing anti-racist so-called legislation are being denied by the Supreme Court, because if they looked at the provisions of the, let's say, Equality Act, or the previous legislations, not all of which have been kind of replaced by the Equality Act, but previous legislations, literally dozens of legislations, they would have seen that Shamima Begum's being denied her British by birth citizenship constituted dozens of crimes and offenses. That's the first one. Secondly, when Reid, sitting as the so-called president of the Supreme Court on the 26th of February 2021, read that stupidly written ruling, it didn't refer to race at all as a factor anywhere, which is the strongest point in favor of Shamima Begum. In the legal constitutional law terms, in terms of the need, the right as well as need to seek to overturn Sajid Javid's withdrawing her or removing her citizenship. Because the reason why there is a so-called judicial review process in place is stated to be to give people the kind of say and platform to challenge decisions that Shamima Begum is entitled to seek and has been deprived of seeking. And there are literally hundreds of international conventions, treaties, and agreements and declarations that have been broken in the Supreme Court by the Supreme Court, including about the fact that where she is now, where she has been supposedly reportedly living, because we don't know the actual truth, we say reportedly because that's the only source we have publicly. She has been kept in a place, in a location, a detention place that is controlled, according to the latest reports, controlled jointly by the Kurdish and the Syrian government. Kurdish doesn't necessarily mean any particular government. Kurdish is an ethnic component. So let's say the Syrian have been in control of the place where Shamima Begum has been detained, kept in detention. Now that is in breach of international law on many levels. She should be freed because while she is in detention, she is not allowed contact with competent legal representatives. So that is a breach of many things that she is entitled to. And these breaches are happening while she is not either charged or being tried for any crime. Think about all of that. It's an innocent girl. I mean, the whole narrative by Fleet Street is that she's a radical. She's a radical threat to the security. Well, they have to produce evidence. If that is evidence, credible evidence, then the Supreme Court has to give lawful expression to the such credible evidence. It hasn't done that. So all the convicted criminals, convicted of various degrees and levels of crime in the years before the Supreme Court ruling against Shamima Begum, let's say between the years from October 2010 until February 2021, all the British criminals that have been found guilty and convicted of any number of crimes, any types of crimes, none of them has been deprived of their citizenship. Now contrast that with the robbery of Shamima Begum's rights by the Supreme Court. She hasn't been even committed. She hasn't been even accused of having committed any crime, let alone being put on trial for any crime, let alone being found guilty of having committed a crime. So where is the fairness in basic terms? There is no fairness. It's blanket racism that Sajid Javid carried out against Shamima Begum. Now, yesterday we talked about the various external kind of websites, external that is not part of the Fleet Street websites, but website in Wales, website for the UK Human Rights Watch, and others. A couple of them writing about the Supreme Court ruling as if they have access to, or they have sought access to, all the legal kind of details and facts and the rights and wrongs of legality and illegality and all the rest of it. None of those pieces has talked about Tower Council's duties, and it hasn't talked about the various international treaties. Remember, this program regularly, in examining the failings and the racism and the ignorance and the dark age kind of agenda and behavior of the Fleet Street Papers, we always make this regular and emphatic reference that the Fleet Street Papers are denying and refusing to acknowledge the UK's duties in various respects, not just about Shamima Begum, but in various respects, UK's duties to UK citizens and UK residents under various international laws and under various international treaties, agreements, challenges, reports, and so on. Now, anyone looking at a picture of, let's say, Tower Hamlets Council, it's not meeting, since the lockdown, it isn't meeting normally. But suppose you can check, wherever you can check website or by going to their website, picture of Tower Hamlets Council in session. Previously, the councillors attending the meeting would be given like this thick kind of amount of volumes of documents. Anyone who is not familiar with the actual behavior of councillors would think, oh my God, that is formidable amount of papers. And they must contain very serious issues and various serious examination of the duties of the council by the councillors, and evidence of the councillors holding the council employees to account. If they think that, they will be justified in thinking that because of the physical kind of volume of papers. But they would be wrong. Because most of the documents that councillors are sent or used to be sent prior to a council meeting or properly constituted council meeting, most of the contents were banalities and stupidities and complete, absolute, utter denial of the duties of the council. That is what the documents are. How do I know? Because that's what I do. I study these things at greater detail than anyone you can ever hope to come across, either on a channel or anywhere else. I am the constitutionalist, apart from being anything else. And the effectiveness of my argument, constitutionally, legally, and the veracity of my presentation and arguments have been vindicated over a very long time in the fact that regardless of which council I'm dealing with, the councils are not able to deny my accusations on the facts. Not because it's coming from me, but on the facts. Councils include elected councillors, chief executives, others like directors and others who speak on behalf of the council, so at any level. So give an example also about similar, comparable kind of bureaucracies. In the divisional court in the High Court in London, numerically the biggest carrier of cases is, of course, the Queen's Bench Division, QBD. Now, the Queen's Bench Division is not just in life or come to life. It doesn't come to life only when it sits in sittings, or sittings are organized under any of the courts under the Queen's Bench Division, because it has got the largest number of courts. Most of its bureaucratic operation is done by civilians or people who are not members of the judiciary. They're administrators. In other words, they're clerks or clerical staff. Now, on the counter at the Queen's Bench Division, you have people sitting on two windows. And the people sitting inside the counters, behind the counters, most of them, I'm not saying every single one of them, but the number that is covered in the most is the majority. So 90% of those who I have encountered are like dummies or morons or racists or liars. I'm saying this, let the Queen's Bench Division or anyone in the High Court, anyone in the ministry deny that with evidence, and I shall come back with time, chapter and verse. Now that is the reality. Now whether they are dummies and morons because it's me on the other side or the other kind of part of the opposite end of the counter has to be kind of examined. It may be that they don't answer questions to me because of my ethnicity or whatever, but I speak the language common to this country, the English language, like I'm speaking now. So there is hardly any excuse, linguistic excuse that they don't understand, or that my pronunciation is somehow kind of difficult to understand. They don't answer questions on the counter, and they don't answer questions on the phone, and they don't answer questions by email. And yet these are the people who are making the decisions on every aspect of the allocation and the scheduling and so on of cases, applications and rebuttals and all the rest of it. And in none of the communications at the counter or by telephone or by email over a very long time have I come across, or do I come across, any sign on the part of the staff in the Queen's Bench Division being even aware, let alone being highly aware of the conventions, the agreements, international agreements, charters, etc., or about any domestic laws, domestic legislation, or about any precedent or decided case. So think about that. It is a very heavy load of actual evidential work that I'm representing in this short statement about the Queen's Bench Division. Queen's Bench Division is because that is where, as I said, numerically the largest number of cases or the loads of cases are handled. That's why I'm saying, but I could say about other courts and other kind of counters, if you like. I could talk about county courts, like Stratford County Court. I could talk about magistrates' courts, Thames Magistrates' Court, Westminster Magistrates' Court, Wells Street Magistrates' Courts, and so on. I mean, I have seen no court personnel, let's say, or member of the judiciary expressly, that is very clearly, make any statement of obedience or loyalty to their duties they owe under the international agreements and charters, or any equivalent derived from those in domestic legislation or any precedent or previous decision. And the reason I say, when I call them licensed law traders, those barristers and solicitors who make their living or their career or money by the fact that they have kind of audience and they have license to appear on behalf of people. The reason I say license is because I treat them on the evidence of their behavior more as licensed abusers of access and rights and whatever, and deniers of their duties that otherwise they are obliged to actually discharge, whether they're defending something or they're prosecuting something, whether they're trying something or whether responding something, responding in a case on behalf of somebody or not. And then they don't. They similarly to the judicial judges and the administrative clerks, they too are completely away, miles away from recognizing the international treaties and agreements. As I say, I invite anyone watching this, if they think that I'm in any way making an inaccurate statement or giving less than complete and fair representation of what happens in those courts, let them send me a direct message with the substance, with the evidence, date, chapter, and verse. Otherwise, don't send me anything just for the sake of it. So this is the reality of the courts and the mentality of the courts. And against that background, Shamima Begum was not treated fairly because the judiciary don't give a damn about rights and entitlements. So take that back to Harmless Council, that attitude that is, and it's the same. Harmless Council, when it was lumbered with the holder of the corrupt post of elected mayor, when it was lumbered with the incumbency of Lutfur Rahman, behaved as negligently towards Shamima Begum as it has behaved towards her since Lutfur Rahman was ousted from the post on 23rd of April 2015. John Biggs has been imposed since 11th of June 2015, and he has behaved as negligently and as contemptibly towards Shamima Begum and her friends' rights. So our campaign is demanding that Harmless Council immediately publishes full reports of what it has been doing, if it has been doing anything to uphold the rights of Shamima Begum, when Shamima Begum and her friends have most deserved the help of the local council. And the help has been deserved by them under the safeguarding the children duties that Harmless Council has owed and owes. Supposing Shamima Begum and her two friends, aged 15, that is children, were reported to have been abducted, and that they have been found to have been abducted by unknown party or parties in a foreign country, in a non-British country, in a country outside of Britain. Suppose they had been reported abducted. What would the government do? What would Tower Hamlets Council do as the local council? So this Sarah, she was abducted, kidnapped, and Nobody knows at this stage about the published or publishable kind of details, whether she was raped and abused before being murdered. An abduction of a child or a woman, young woman, is given correctly more emergency and more kind of serious attention. And they would have been obliged to give the abduction of Shamima Begum and the other two friends, school friends, similar emergency treatment and attention. Have they done that? If they haven't done that, why haven't they done that? And the questions go on. This is the direction. The questions multiply. And what we are doing here in this series of questions and updates is not only upholding the rights of these children, but also upholding the rights of other children that have not been necessarily found in this position, but could be in all kinds of difficulties. Let's say one example. Families, it doesn't happen normally it doesn't happen with people who are single, but family settings, historically on the records, provide the majority of the evidence of sexual abuse of children by their own families. And the majority of the children sexually abused by their own families are girls. Now, when in a family, young children, girls, being subjected to all kinds of sexual abuse, where can they go? By definition, children are weak. They can't go anywhere, and then even if they go some small distance, they can't survive. Now, what kind of protection is Tower Hamlets Council providing to children, girls currently being abused in Tower Hamlets? Nobody knows, because they are not publishing anything about this. And I'm saying to the council, publish the facts so that we can see the context and contextual behavior. And we are asking the councillors on Tower Hamlets Council to support this call. And if they don't support, to tell us why they are not supporting, what law, what excuse have they got. And we are challenging the councillors to say if they believe the Tower Hamlets Council has betrayed its safeguarding duties towards Shamima Begum and her two friends. We say her two friends, and we are not mentioning the third one, about whom we are still investigating. The third one reportedly had left a year earlier, and then the other twist or the connection is that these three girls, Shamima Begum and the other two, only went to Syria in 2015 to bring back that other friend. So who knows the full details of what happened? Does Tower Hamlets Council care to tell the public, tell the community what it knows and why it knows, how much it knows, and why it doesn't know how much it doesn't know? That is to say, what has been the level of activity by Tower Hamlets Council at any level of bureaucracy in complying with its duties as owed to the children in danger. Anyone watching this will know, or want to know, why we are not talking about the other allegations that have been kind of published in the media against Shamima Begum and her friends. The answer is that we are focusing this time we are focusing attention on what could actually have prevented these girls from going the wrong way. And the preventing would have happened if the council was doing its safeguarding children duties. Why didn't Tower Hamlets Council do its safeguarding the children duties? Why? Is Tower Hamlets Council made of dead people in posts as councillors and as mayor? If they're not dead, what on earth were they doing when they were not taking action to support and defend and protect these children? We say this because according to the local press, we are talking about the Fleet Street papers, but locally there is this pretense publication, the local press so-called in East London. For example, what I call, and I have called for a very long time, the East London idiotizer. Idiotizer like a verb, transitive verb. That which makes you an idiot, or that which is engaged in giving idiotic contents to the so-called readers. So it's generally called the East London Advertiser, but I have evidentially rearranged and edited it to being idiotizer, to such a point of accuracy and acceptability, even by the ones that were employed by that idiotizer, that a number of them called it the East London idiotizer in communications with me in order to show me that they agree with me. And one of those includes, of course, Ted Jury. Ted Jury is spelled, Jury is Jeory. Ted Jury features in the contents of the ruling by the election commissioner that finally ruled in the election petition against Lutfur Rahman and ousted him. And this commissioner is called Morey. Morey is called M-A-W-R-E-Y, Morey. Richard Morey. He is a licensed law trader and part-time kind of judge of sorts. But he was the one who sat to hear the petition against Lutfur Rahman, who was incumbent of the elected mayor in the name of and at the expense of Tower Hamlets Council, or Tower Hamlets community, Tower Hamlets electors. Another current note, topical note, allegedly at this time, which is 12th of March 2021, a campaign is supposed to be ongoing in Tower Hamlets to convince voters on the scheduled May 2021 council elections to vote at the referendum and vote no to the continuation of the corrupt post of elected mayor. As at this point, I don't know the extent of the campaign going on because it's remote and it's locked down. But generally my study shows that the campaign may not be going on at all. Because most of the people who are supposed to be campaigning against the continuation of the corrupt post of mayor, most of the people that I know are not telling the truth about their role and their involvement. That's the problem. And that is why they are not doing the necessary amount of campaigning in order to stop this corruption and the criminal post of elected mayor continuing. Now, what will happen if they don't do the job, and if most people don't know or don't vote no, then the corrupt criminal post will remain for another 10 years. And going by the records of John Biggs and Lutfur Rahman in post, that can only be bad for the whole community. No democracy, no accountability, no transparency, no opposition to racism, no actual compliance with the requirements that the council on paper remains under but fails to deliver, as we have shown. The requirements that Tower Hamlets Council should be delivering protection to children like Shamima Begum. And it is, look at the length of time. It's October 2010 is when Lutfur Rahman came into office as the so-called elected mayor. And this is the 11th calendar year. And for 10 calendar years, Tower Hamlets Council was silent about the safeguarding the children duties. And for 10 calendar years, Tower Hamlets Council effectively failed, let down Shamima Begum and the other children. So our demand is already listed. And if the Tower Hamlets Council fails to publish, and if Tower Hamlets Council fails to pay damages and compensation to the victims of its negligence, then we shall campaign for Tower Hamlets Council to be actually prosecuted. Now, prosecution is not as simple as I can say it, but this is the constitutional way to move, despite the fact that it's not guaranteed that we shall succeed. But that's not the main important thing. If we prosecute Tower Hamlets Council, as we showed during the campaign against the Crossrail whole plot against the East End of London, if we proceed with the campaign of prosecuting Tower Hamlets Council, if we do that, then there is absolutely guaranteed loss to the council's whatever reputation, because we shall be drawing attention to this. And that is the strength, that is the power of a campaign like ours, like we can do and we shall do. We shall daily draw attention to the betrayal by Tower Hamlets Council and councillors, betrayal of Shamima Begum. They can't deny that. That is the actual verdict. It doesn't happen. It doesn't have to be a kind of rubber stamping order by a court. But legally campaigning for such a verdict is more powerful, more effective than actual ruling. Any Tower Hamlets councillor watching this should take note, and you know that it is what will happen, and you cannot ignore this campaign. So you should contact us with your offer of support this campaign, supporting this campaign for justice for the children. Remember what we're talking about? We're talking about when Shamima Begum and her other friends were children. It was only a few years until they were 19, they were children. And throughout all that time, Tower Hamlets Council has failed and neglected its duties to protect these children. And there are children already, currently, unknown, unidentifiable, that is, to us. But there are any number of children in Tower Hamlets being abused, sexually abused and otherwise abused by members of their family, relatives of their families. And those children deserve absolutely urgent protection and action and support. And we're asking Tower Hamlets Council as part of this campaign to do the urgent help, provide the urgent help and protection to those children as well. Now, anyone watching this may wonder if this kind of commentary and discussion is available anywhere else. We say that not. So keep watching and keep coming back to see the updates on all the issues that we are talking about, and keep supporting the movement for enlightenment, that is, bring the truth to the people. We are not part of a career, and we don't have to have a career. We have to confine and stick to the biggest career that can ever exist in this communication. That is to tell the truth expose the lies, and support the victims of lies and denials of duties and negligence. Now, there is this item in the I newspaper. There are several kind of small items, but they are worth referring to. Now, here is a piece about the law. I mean, as I said, law is the British law, the English law is corrupt bureaucracy. There is a piece here by somebody called Nigel Morris, who is described as political editor here, on page 7 of the I newspaper of Friday, the 12th of March, 2021, that is today. And it says, publication of plans to improve rape conviction rates has been delayed by a legal battle over claims that the Crown Prosecution Service secretly changed its policy on bringing cases to court. The government had been due to produce its proposals before Christmas, but it has been held up by a case brought against the CPS by the End Violence Against Women coalition. The coalition claims that the number of rape cases and the charging rate declined precipitately after a covert and unlawful change to charging policy in 2017. So it's not just me saying it. Of course, it's not just me, but most of the people who know the truth about the corruption of the legal bureaucracy know that it is a corrupt. It's not because there are not laws to protect children or protect women, victims of rape and murder like Sarah Everard, but the personnel. So McPherson could not be more wrong because he said that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist as opposed to individually racist. And as I said before, it's the individual decision makers that make the institution racist and they act racist. And if they are given the kind of exemption as McPherson did, then nobody can be held to account for that behavior, that racist behavior. Similarly, the Crown Prosecution Service, which is the England-based or England and Wales-based kind of machine of the government to bring prosecutions for rape, it has been now accused. I mean, it has been accused of for years being secretly sabotaging the relevant attempt they're mentioning to increase the rates of convictions for rape. And this Nigel Morris, the political editor of the I newspaper, says rape conviction rates in England and Wales have fallen to the lowest level since records began. Police recorded 55,130 rapes in 2019 and 20, but there are only 2,102 prosecutions and 1,430 convictions. Now, can you imagine the actual rates? the number of rapes was 55,000 and the number of prosecutions only 2,000 and the number of convictions only 1,400. So this is itself a crime, to suppress most of the evidence of the rapes, or most of the rapes. And so this is literally criminal. So when I say the judiciary is a criminal, it is inclusive, of course, of the people who are in place to make the judiciary active or activate the judiciary, which is the Crown Prosecution Service in the cases of criminal cases. So anyone watching this can see the extent, the widespread extent, and the main norm, that is the pattern of criminality, denial, negligence, racism, both on the field, if you like, in the actual courts and the court system and the bureaucracy, and also in the media. Fleet Street giving the denial such kind of prominence that Williams is saying that we are not racist. And this thing about the Metropolitan Police facing, well, let's go back to this question about this murder of Sarah Everard. Yesterday in the House of Commons, there were, of course, urgent debates and discussions, references, speeches made by mainly women members of Parliament, including Hattie Harman. Well, her name is Harriet Harman, Mother of the House. Mother, that is to do with the length of years. She has been now in the House of Commons for the longest number of years. That is what makes her entitled to be called the Mother of the House. She hit out the head of the Metropolitan Police's assurances. This must be hit at or hit out at the head of the Metropolitan Police Service, that is Cressida Dick, for assuring that abductions of women are thankfully rare in the UK, arguing such crimes are the worst of everyday male threats that women endure. Now, I'm not a fan of Hattie Harman, but this is a fact that she is telling, which is absolutely true. As I said, racism is an offense that is occurring in hundreds of thousands of times every day. And threats to women and violence against women and abductions are far higher than the Metropolitan Police's current commissioner, a woman called Cressida Dick, said after the arrest of this serving Metropolitan policeman for the murder of Sarah Everard. So what is happening here is that the incidents of crime, wrongdoing, negligence are everyday occurrence in every field in this society. And in relation to reports or in relation to claims for doing action to stop them or to remedy those defects and to compensate and apologize to the victims of these negligence and wrongs, these are being countered. These are being countered by the media, being countered by the government, and countered by the people who are in posts. For example, Cressida Dick, the current commissioner of the police, she is reported to have said that thankfully such cases are rare. Well, Harriet Harman is totally rejecting that. And Cressida Dick, a woman, should know better than to say that, because she must have not only experience as a woman of how women are seen by violent and attacking an in denial man, but she must have come across any number, thousands and thousands of women who must have told her how threatened they are and they feel from male violence and anti-women violence. Because sometimes the colluders in the anti-women violence are part of the complicit clique that mounts and carries out the attack on the women. So they are part of that, but not mainly women. It's mainly men, anti-women men, that carry out the attacks. So let's take this kind of connection between the duties owed to children and Harmless Council neglecting Shamima Begum and the other two girls because they were girls. Could that be possible? We cannot answer that definitively that was happening, but until and unless Tower Hamlets Council publishes the evidence of what it did and didn't do, we cannot be certain at this stage in terms of legal and lawful evidence. But we raise the question, did Tower Hamlets Council consider, in neglecting their duties to Shamima Begum and the other two girls, their duties in the context of bias against women and children, young girls? Did they have a policy to have active steps in place so that any anti-women, anti-sexist, any sexist bias against girls would be dealt with? And anyone responsible for bias against girls would be held to account by Tower Hamlets Council, in Tower Hamlets Council, by Tower Hamlets councillors, and by the incumbent in the post of the mayor, executive mayor, in the name of Tower Hamlets. What have they done? We ask these questions and we will continue in the next parts. Now, this is the point at 11:10, approximately 11:10 hours GMT, which coincidentally is the local time currently in the UK, 11:10 in the morning of Friday, 12th of March 2021. In the next part, we shall focus on Roxana Fiaz. Now, Roxana Fiaz is the third child of a Pakistani bus driver in the UK who has been in a public post. The other two are, of course, Sajid Jabi, the Conservative MP, and the other one, of course, is the incumbent in the post of mayor in the name of London called Sadiq Khan. And Roxana Fiaz is the elected post holder in the London Borough of Newham, which is next door to Tower Hamlets. So we are putting this part, to an end at 11:10 hours GMT on Friday, 12th of March 2021. And we shall be continuing, and the continuation will start focusing on the role of Roxana Fiaz